Mario Kart World is the newest Mario Kart after the last one released 5 years ago with Mario Kart Home Circuit, or 11 since the last mainline Mario Kart on the Wii U. It's been a very long wait for a new Mario Kart. It's honestly insane that no completely new one had released since 2014. But here we are, the new one, which has had a lot of controversy around it from its price tag and the misinformation about the price tag and just not looking all that fun. I was still excited though, especially with the new jump seemingly being a new form of snaking. Also, I'm a Nintendo fangirl, so I was incredibly excited to play Mario Kart and Deltarune on this thing. I was cautiously optimistic about Mario Kart because it was pointed out to me how kinda slow and kinda straight some things were, and also the fact that the driving in between the courses may destroy the pace of the game. I was still excited as hell when I got my own Switch too, so I plopped the game in and played all the Grand Prix that night, which took 2 hours, and yeah, it was pretty fun. But it is quite flawed, especially with the structure, which is a bit unfortunate because this is the best feeling Mario Kart since Mario Kart Wii. I honestly really like how this game feels to play. The drift, while being wide, is honestly a nice feeling drift. I really like turning corners in this game more than really any other entry that I can think of. Why? I don't know, it just does. The new jump mechanic is also quite cool. While, for the most part, being quite situational, it's honestly quite satisfying to use it, as it is quite difficult to use outside of straight snaking, which is slower, so it's just difficult to use. This is due to needing a decent little bit of prep before you jump, as you do need to hold it for a little bit, which on 150cc, I found quite hard to start charging early enough. But when I did get a jump onto something, especially when I was more inexperienced, it was quite nice. I do wish that overall, the tracks and the routes between them had more places to jump or even have some shortcuts or alternate routes which required a jump, aside from the debatably slower grind rails, which this game also adds. Everywhere you can find different rails and just thin things, which you can either grind on from the ground or land on from a jump or a glider. They usually take you down on an automated route, give you mini turbo, which you use when you either jump either in a straight line or to the left or the right. I honestly quite like this addition. It's used quite well in a lot of cases, especially on Mario Bros. Circuit where you can have this turn shortcut and then can do some actually cool cuts by using the jumps on the rails. Also, if you use the tricks properly, you can actually travel slightly faster in a straight line rather than just driving straight, which is pretty cool. However, a lot of the time the rails are on the outside of the tracks, making them slower to use. I also find that sometimes, mainly on Whistletop Summit, that how the rails are positioned actively mess me up and make driving more annoying. The rails are quite close together and on a turn near the wall, so when I want to use the stored mini turbo, I can't without either running onto the wall or being straight back onto the rail, which sometimes doesn't actually happen, and I just end up running into the wall. So I can't even leave the rail if I wanted to without sabotaging myself further by having to slow down. So I just don't get attached to the rail. It's also a bit annoying you can't just jump to the other one, and when I wanted to switch between them, I just couldn't because the jump you can do off them in either direction was just too long. I feel like it would be nicer if Game Detective if there was any rails within like a certain area to the left or the right of you and snapped you onto those rails. Whilst I believe this would be difficult to program, I believe it would aid the game to feel nicer and more fun, especially on Whistletop Summit and near railroads. This entry also changes the underwater driving to driving on top of water, which, while I prefer the underwater driving concept, the above water driving works okay in context to this game. Some of these courses, such as Koopa Troopa Beach and the new extended Peach Beach, work a lot better with the above water driving than if they had underwater driving in my opinion, even though Koopa Troopa Beach technically isn't above water driving in the same sense, but let's not worry about that. I also think the world aspect of this game as a whole benefits a bit more from having above water driving than below one. Some of the new levels and even some retro tracks are designed with above water driving in mind, and I think out of all the courses with water driving, that maybe one small section of Peach Beach could have been better with the ability to drive underwater. However, I'm just not that big of a fan of water driving. I personally just find it to be a lot rougher and less responsive, which, while I believe is the intention, I personally am not a fan of. Everything just feels a bit more unresponsive as you bounce a lot while in the water, which I'll admit is quite fun, especially when you can perform tricks due to it. However, the drift ends up feeling a lot worse and more inconsistent, which overall just outweighs the positives for me. While I don't hate water driving, I do prefer driving on land quite a bit. The trick system also has a slight upgrade, now allowing you to trick in the air and not just while launching on the ramp, and honestly it's quite appreciated, especially since it allows you to have extra air control, as if you trick into a direction, you'll get slightly propelled into that direction, possibly making it easier to set up a turn or just get back on course if you're veering off it, which is honestly quite nice. I also just spam trick the button for some reason when I'm in the air. I'm not sure why, I think it makes me go slower. 2000 IQ individual here. Overall, despite some flaws, the movement is quite fun in this game. The core gameplay is probably the best it's ever been. The extra movement mechanics, while somewhat flawed, are fun inclusions, and the water driving, while not being a fan, adds some variety, which is appreciated. Good movement doesn't mean anything if the tracks suck, which I don't know if they do, because of the fact you would drive between each course. Okay, that's a lie, they're pretty good for the most part, but I just want a good transition. I personally believe that the gimmick where you drive between tracks in its current form just harms the game. The tracks are seemingly emphasized to be the main part of each course, at least from the cups highlighting them. That would make you believe that the tracks themselves are important. For the most part, no. They made it so if the course you're going to has laps, you only do one lap of the course, and the other 2 laps are replaced by you racing to that course. This pretty much makes each course a section course in the Grand Prix at least. I'm using section, not 3 sections, as you can have more than 3 depending on the track and travel distance. This sort of detracts from the actual section tracks, such as DK Spaceport. In Mario Kart 7 and 8, before boost course got added, where all tour tracks that were basically the same thing got added. I say that as if I actually have MKA Deluxe. Anyway, they genuinely felt more special and a nice change of pace. They were made cooler by their unique gimmick being the fact that it's one long race. That's what helped make Wario and Big Blue and Mario Kart 8 feel more special and cooler as tracks. But when all the tracks are 3-section tracks, none of them are. Or like, they aren't as unique and they sort of lose a bit of a luster. Especially when they usually feel less specifically designed for racing than the tracks themselves. A lot of these roads and paths are fairly straight, make the minimap look like this. Now this isn't completely horrible, as the speed 150cc doesn't make it feel like these drag, mostly, and the traffic helps make some of these fairly straight paths feel more dynamic, and as if you're doing something. However, in some sections such as the massive glide section over the desert, they can really suck. In the drive from the safari course to Crown City, it can be incredibly annoying. The big jump in the desert is probably the worst part of this game. Or the bridge that makes the drive between Crown City and faraway races pretty much just a straight line, which is so boring as you do literally nothing. Anyway, due to the massive way to get to the ground, I just get so uninterested and bored. There's just so little interaction you can do because everyone's in the air, and diving down quickly won't really help any of it because I believe it's slow and still such a wide and straight area with no traffic. Driving would probably be equally as boring, especially when there'll be no one around to compete with you or have some sort of tenseness with, since they're all above you, which you can't really see, so you kind of just chug along until they all land. These are usually the exception though, as most of the time driving in between the courses is entertaining enough. It's just disappointing when in versus mode I can do 3 laps of 4 tracks and overall have more fun than in the Grand Prix. This is mainly due to the courses being more specifically designed than the roads in between the courses. Now while I could just play versus mode and pick all the tracks and ensure I get all 3 laps, I don't feel like I should have to disregard the major gimmick and selling point of the title to get the maximum amount of fun out of it. I would also like to have a pre-organized cups to race through, as that way I'm more likely to actually play all the tracks, even if there's 1 or 2 in a cup I don't like that much. This is because it's much easier to go, oh hey, I haven't played this cup in a while, compared to, oh hey, I haven't done this course in a while, and then proceed not to play the course because the course kind of sucks. It's also just nice to have an easy thing to give you a list of tracks to play, as it makes it easier to get into a game and not have the pace broken by too much in between each race by deciding on what track to play. Especially if you're playing with others and don't want to argue about what course to play in between each race. I believe there are 2 different ways that can make this drive between courses idea work better and for more players. My first thought is that they could have made it so that the racing to the course is pretty much its own separate race, which you get reduced points for. Maybe you can get like 10 for first place, and so then you can have a maximum score of 100, which is a nice number. This would help keep the courses emphasized, as in this version, you would still do the 3 laps or all the parts of a regular course to make it both more fun and also allow people to appreciate the courses themselves more. The other option, which I believe believe could have been better is just to make the world like 50% smaller and have the racing in between the courses only be the first part of the race and you would do 2 laps of the actual course. Now this would help keep the tracks themselves emphasized and also make bananas not as useless as they are now with every track being in 3 parts. I guess you could also just do a full 3 laps after driving there, but I feel like in its current form, it may cause most of the courses to feel overly long. You'd have to play the equivalent of like 5 or 6 laps worth of driving, which could just make the races feel like they drag, which they already occasionally feel like they do. So overall, the new world system they've created is quite flawed like everything I have to say, mainly due to the path between each racetrack being less specifically designed than the racetracks themselves, which is disappointing because the courses in this game are pretty dang good. To be fair, I like Yoshi Falls. Wait, my credibility, no! The Nitro courses in this game genuinely might be the best in the series since Wii. It's nowhere near as good as Wii, but it's definitely better than Mario Kart 8 and 7. Personally, I'm a fan of about half these new courses. I think Boo Cinema, Dry Bones Burnout, Bowser's Castle, Danny Lane Depths, Great Question Rock Ruins, Mario Bros Circuit, Acorn Heights, and Rainbow Road are all good to great. Mario Bros Circuit may genuinely be the best first track in the series, probably because it's the least suitable for beginners. Let's ignore that part. Starview Peak, Faraway Oasis, and the Cheap one, Salty Speedway, Whistletop Summit, Crown City, and Peach Stadium are all okay. Primarily, it's either because of water driving or just not really living up to that concept. Such as Peach Stadium and Starview Peaks, they both feel like they would be more focused around the actual locations, such as Peach's Castle and the Comet Observatory, but it sort of doesn't really feel like it during the track, which is a bit underwhelming. And DK Spaceport kinda sucks. I personally find the structure of this course uninteresting to race on, despite the cool premise of it, by translating Donkey Kong, the arcade game, into a Mario Kart course. In practice though, I'm just not a fan. I find the obstacles on each level aren't that threatening, so I end up driving in a straight line or a relatively straight line. There overall just aren't that many opportunities to catch up into the person in front of you besides like each corner due to how shortcutless this track is. A course like Boost Cinema is also quite shortcutless, however I like that one much more as there's a much more opportunity to actually take the corner sharply and just have better lines to catch up to the person in front. The track just overall does feel nicer to drive and it's just a lot more turn. The retro tracks in comparison are honestly somewhat weak and I have completely different thoughts about a lot of them. So here's just some random thoughts I've had, kinda not really. DK Pass and Desert Hills are very generic courses for their environments and I kind of feel like it would have been cool to get something more unique such as DK's Snowboard Cross or Mount Wario instead of DK Pass. A course where, despite the fact I can remember the layout fairly well, is sort of a nothing course in my mind, unless you count time trials. Honestly, the time trials is quite fun. Desert Hill actively annoys me. I generally really like Desert Hills in Mario Kart Wii. I think the layout of the course is pretty decent and the hills at the end of the track, which I feel like the course is named after, are just really fun. The bends through them are very satisfying to take and hopping over the hills is just so fun. Where the hell are the hills? What did you do to them? This kinda ruins the track for me. It's still an okay track, but it loses the main reason why I'm a Desert Hills defender. Also, now the Desert Hills meant to be this little part in the middle, don't even look like stand dunes. Most of the other retro courses are at least okay. Wario Stadium, Airship Fortress, Moo Moo Meadows, Peach Beach, Dino Jungle, and Koopa Troopa Beach are all good. Don't ask why I like the circle course so much, I don't know either. DK Pass, Choco Mountain, Wario Shipyard, and Shy Guy Bazaar are okay, and I actively don't like Sky High Sundae, Mario Circuit, and Desert Hills. I find it really weird that there are no courses from Mario Kart 8, and the one from Tour they decided to bring back was Sky High Sundae. That course isn't that good. Despite most of our remakes not being the most interesting, Peach Beach is incredibly interesting. It's gotten an overhaul and has been transformed into a 3-segment course. The first segment is a regular Peach Beach course from the previous games, but the second and third parts are completely different, which honestly is quite cool. I do find it odd though that there are only 14 retro courses. For some reason, Nintendo decided to only include 30 courses in this game, which I think is a bit insane. The previous installment, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, had 48 courses built in onto the cartridge, which, while it would have been nice to have that many, I can understand why they decided not to put 48 courses into this world. However, I feel like they should have included at least 32, which the games have been releasing with since the DS. I just feel like adding the last 2 retro courses would have been nice. You could have done something like Banshee Boardwalk just outside Boo Cinema, or another water course somewhere in the ocean, or another SNES course, as they've got multiple little parts around which are like, wow, this is like a SNES course. Or Snowland from GBA in that little random segment in the middle of nowhere. Perfect. It's probably not meant to be that course, but still, I just think anything would have been nice. Or even maybe just some Super Circuit representation. Honestly, I feel like there should have been 2 courses from each of the previous game, as 8 times 2 is 16. But at the moment, there is no 8 or Super Circuit courses, a tour course, and 3 DS courses. I understand that would have been hard to insert an extra 2 courses into this world, but I feel like they could have been designed before the development started. I also feel like they could have designed cups a bit better. The cup design in this game is really weird. I feel like there isn't really a difficulty curve in the game, as I feel like the hardest course in this game, Airship Fortress, is in the Banana Cup. That's the second cup in the game. I'm sorry? I generally don't understand why this course is so early, aside from the layout restrictions. A lot of the fairly easy courses are later in the game as well. Mario Circuits, and Toad's Factory, and Moo Moo Meadows are in the last 2 cups. And at best they should be in the 4th cup, at the latest. I feel like it could have been more balanced. Personally, based on the current structure in the world, I feel like these cups would have been slightly better. Mushroom Cup stays exactly the same, but swap Crown City for Desert Hills. Flower Cup start at Shaggy Bazaar, then go to Wario Stadium, then Crown City, then Peach Stadium. Star Cup keep exactly the same. Shell Cup change to the Mario Circuit, Dandelion Depths, Moo Moo Meadows, and Choco Mountain. Change the Banana Cup to Koopa Troopa Beach, Crown City, Faraway Oasis, and Cheap Cheap Course. Leaf Cup make it the old Banana Cup. Lightning Cup make it Boo Cinema. Dry Bones Burnout, Airship Fortress, and Bowser's Castle. God, that is such a cool cup to do. It does have some faults, such as 2 lava courses, and the fact that some backtracking is done from Airship Fortress to Bowser's Castle. But with how the game's structured, that is a much more climactic and cool penultimate cup. Then the special cup just replaced Mario Circuits with Toad's Factory. Yeah, that one probably the most not fixed cup, but I couldn't really find a place elsewhere where Toad's Factory could fit. I feel like this order would have a much better difficulty curve mostly, and will not have as many beginner courses right at the end of the game. There is a few faults, such as a lot of courses probably needing to be rotated a bit just so that their entrances are in a bit of a better position. However, I still think it's a bit better than the current courses. But ignoring the lack difficulty curve, they're a pretty decent selection overall. My personal favorite is Leaf Cup, as it has a very good selection of courses, and all the in-betweens are a lot more curvy and a lot more dynamic compared to the others, such as the Shell Cup where you cross a massive bridge, which is pretty much a straight line. I genuinely hate that in-between so much. The other primary mode, Knockout Tour, is pretty decent despite the fact it's pretty much solely the in-betweens with a lap of a course right at the end. Basically one massive race where if you're in the bottom 4 spots when you reach a checkpoint, you get eliminated. I personally like how it feels a lot more like an endurance test as these races go on for 8 to 10 minutes, which due to the consistency of people getting eliminated, it doesn't really feel like much of a drag. I do find, however, that if I'm in first place by a pretty wide margin and there aren't any items coming my way, it can be a bit uninteresting, which I don't really feel on other tracks, even the one that's literally a circle. I have some fun when in first to try and lap the CPUs. I think it's due to the layout not being as challenging as the regular courses, and there isn't really any way you can fall off for the most part. And also, the CPUs seem to not like taking really long shortcuts for the most part. In online though, this mode is a lot more fun as there's more of a chaos to it, as there's more people taking these massive shortcuts, and honestly, I like this mode a lot more online with real people. My primary issue with the mode, though, is that there's only 8 rally courses, which is somewhat underwhelming. Each tour course just feels like one entity compared to the 4 smaller ones that make up Grand Prix. I believe they should have either doubled it so there are 16 rallies instead of 8, or you're allowed to create your own rally and versus mode. I'm not sure how feasible it would be. I feel like it wouldn't be very feasible to actually make that a thing, but it would have been cool. Versus mode is the best mode in this game by far, primarily because you're just allowed to do 3 laps of a course instead of traveling between them. That also just makes them better by default. I like how they allow you to take a path between multiple of a course and not just the paths allowed in Grand Prix, which is really nice. I usually don't do this, but it's how I've created the new cups for the game by seeing what the game allows you to drive in between. It would have been cool if you could do it with every course in the game, but I understand why it is restricted as to not make the races too long. Also, these paths were handmade and not constructed by an algorithm. They would have to make at least 870 paths compared to be around probably 150, which would have been crazier than if Silksong actually released. Wait, what do you mean it's probably going to release this year? I also feel like it would have been nice in Versus if you could pick some of the alternate forms of some courses, as sometimes when traveling to them, when you actually reach them, you do a lap which just isn't part of the actual course. The main one I'm thinking of is like Shy Guy Bazaar, where you can do this completely different path, or Crown City, where you can do one of the 3 sections. I feel like that would have been such a nice option, as you could practice those paths more, and it's also just would have been quite cool to do 3 laps of the alternate designs. All of these modes, while flawed, are still quite fun with friends and family. I've had a blast playing Mario Kart for the past month with my sisters, and even online. However, if you have one device, there's technically a single player exclusive mode, Time Trials, and also 3 roam. 3 roam seems to be one of the selling points of this game, as the game is literally named after the open world we've crafted. I don't really understand why. In 3 roam you can go anywhere in the world, you can explore around the main course or in other areas of the land. Here you can find P switches which give you mini challenges, question mark panels which give you stickers, and hidden peach medallions which also give you stickers. I personally think that there is simultaneously way too much to do in this open world, and too little. There are like 300 or something P switches in the world, or something quite large, which is frankly ridiculous. Like, it's cool that they are there, but no one is going to find all of them without guidance, as there's literally no way to know where they are, or how many you're missing, or where without just seeing them. It's either that, or you look it up. I'm really just not a big fan of the lack of direction you're given, or can find. You need to discover everything from yourself, which can be cool. However, unlike the Shrines of Breath of the Wild, it doesn't really feel like you're discovering them. The challenges are quite short, with most of them being 15 to 20 seconds long, and most of the time being incredibly easy. Also, there's like 300 of them compared to 120 in Breath of the Wild, which has a significantly bigger map. The challenges in this game give me a similar feeling to the Koroks, where yahaha, I found them, but do you expect me to find the 2 million in the world on my own without any guidance? No! And the Koroks, at least initially, give you much more valuable things to your journey. The only slight exception is the question mark panels, which are scattered around at the courses, and the game keeps a tally of how many of the 5 at each course you've gone, which honestly is quite nice. It feels realistic to actually find them all, as despite the quantity, you're still given some guidance and a way to know if you've gone them all. The peach medallions are kinda dumb. Sometimes they just won't appear until after you've done something specific to find, and from the one I found, which you had to do this, I probably would have never gotten it if I didn't look it up, because for some reason mirror mode, it needs 10 of the collectibles you can find in the open world, and then to be the special cup. I think that's weird. I'm personally just not a fan of free roam. The lack of things to do and the few things you can do being rather shallow due to their prize just being a sticker which is just next to your name. I just don't get that much enjoyment from this mode overall. Like the battle mode.
Place tie, we're in a first place tie, people. Why the fuck am I in third?
I haven't actually played them that much, but they mostly use random layouts from the open world and name them after a track and call it a day, with like 2 exceptions. It's okay. Some layouts work better than others, but I didn't enjoy my time with it too much. It can be especially annoying when the layouts just have dead ends. A few final things which may be more nitpicky. Lakitu is too stingy in my opinion. There are some cool cuts you could theoretically do in these courses, but Lakitu just doesn't allow you. I've gotten picked up by him a few times and I feel like I shouldn't have, and it's a bit annoying. He also just doesn't let you go backwards in this game, which is kind of lame. I also think it's odd that not all characters have costumes in this game. The main kind of cast do, but most of the enemies don't. I think it would have been cool to have at least just 1 or 2 simple outfits of them. Even just like a hat or a scarf would have been nice. Online is incredibly fun though. It may genuinely add a good 20 hours on if I actually had more than just 7 a week of NSO. Having a lot of real players is just a lot of fun. The only flaw is that for some reason, some people just move left to right incredibly quickly and it's weird. And allegedly the desync can get pretty bad sometimes. Overall, Mario Kart World is pretty good, but I feel like it should have been slightly more considering the wait time since the last original entry. There are less tracks than Mario Kart 8, and despite being quite a big game, a lot of that content feels more like fluff. Is it worth $80? Yeah, if you find it for 80, get it right away. It's like $120 over here. That's the same price as NBA 2K, by the way.